Hi everyone, Todd Sheldon here, back with you again with CFI Pro, and continuing on with our second week, the fundamentals of instruction. And what is this going to entail? What's going to go on? What am I going to do for these? Well, for these next 7 videos, it's going to be me full-blown on teaching these fundamentals of instruction. So if you've never got a FOI course, you're going to get one. Now, I want you to completely understand that when I do, I'm very big about going through the material. So when you look at the book, if you're following along with me, I don't teach every single aspect of this book. And I want you to know why. Why don't I teach every single aspect of this entire book? Well, because the PTS is not asking you to understand every single aspect of this entire book. The PTS is only asking you to regurgitate the information of the elements that's contained within the PTS. So, the master of the element would depend on how much of a master the person who's asking you the questions would be. And since generally in our industry, the people who are actually asking these questions, generally, probably 90% of them don't know about this material anyway, which is standard psychology, basic psychology. Very, very good possibility that they don't know. But that's okay. I'm actually here to teach you. You'll end up knowing probably more than they know. So that's what I'm here today to do. And I'm going to do all 7, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, all the way to Golf. And I think that at the end of this, you're going to have a good understanding, a good working knowledge, and you can come back and you can watch these over and over and over again until you get your heart content of FOI material. I think that I have a good style of teaching this, and I can't wait to share it with you. So hopefully you won't be too bored in it. I'll try to make it painless. With this task A, about 45 minutes. Task B is about an hour and 30 minutes or so. It's pretty long. I'll be sure to take a couple of intermissions in there so that way you can do what you need to do. I don't want you sitting in front of a computer for an hour and 30 minutes, but feel free to stop, pause, whatever, come back at a later date. It's a good thing about these videos. You don't have to sit in front of one and just self-paced. You just watch it as however much you can possibly take of my exciting and fabulous stories of instructing and how I blend that in with the whatever. Anyway, so I'll try to make it as interesting for you as possible because I have experienced a lot of the stuff that's actually in this book, and the way I've got to teach you, I've actually experienced it in flight instruction. So I can't wait to share that with you so you can kind of see how this stuff really actually works together. I'm so excited. Anyway, as we get down through the rest of the modules, they end up being somewhere around the 45-minute mark or so for each one. C is about an hour, D is about 50 minutes or so, and the remainder of them are about 30, 45 minutes apiece. Not that bad. It dwindles off as you get closer to the end. So without further delay, let's go ahead and talk about this fundamentals of instruction and how this relates. So if you want to, you can go ahead and start the clock now. I think I've been talking for about 3 minutes or so, and we can go ahead and kind of see exactly how long does it take Todd Sheldon to present the fundamentals of instruction, area of operation A, human behavior and effective communication. All right, so the first thing is I'm going to present the task A as if I am a client and I'm in front of the DPE and I am literally giving him this speech in the oral. Like, this is how the most highly prepared person, or the person who actually knows about psychology, would actually give this lesson. So I'm going to be talking as if I'm the applicant, the client, because you spend way too much money to be called a student. So the client is in front of the DPE and they're getting ready to deliver the message. I never deliver this message the same way twice. So if you've heard this message before already for me in a previous class I may have taught for you, it's probably not going to be the same because I just ad lib as I go along. I have situations I like to do. So without further ado, let's get this party started. All right, so I'm here today, sir, to talk to you about human behavior and effective communication. Now, what this lesson means to me and how it's going to affect my client is I must be able to understand what a person's needs are, what seems to motivate them, what is guiding them through this training. If I can understand that as an instructor, I'm really going to be proficient at helping my student reach their goals, which is important for me. Along the way, I have to make sure, though, that as an instructor, one of the main ways of me communicating with my client is through either some type of verbal or physical nature, and I have to be able to have that communication line open with my student, as well as I've got to be aware of anything that could come in between with me and my student working together. So today is what I'm going to talk with you about in this particular lesson here, and at the end of the lesson we should have enough information in our heads to be able to successfully work with a client and be able to guide that person along their way and keep them motivated and keep their needs satisfied. So the first thing that I want to be able to talk with you about is the definitions of human behavior. Now there are a couple of different definitions of human behavior. Kind of the ones that kind of stand out to me as an instructor are the ones like an attempt to explain the how and why humans function the way they do. In fact, as an instructor, it's been very fascinating to me over the years. Like, how is it that every single student I have, when they first get in the airplane, they make their very first landing, their mental state seems to be about the same. Before they make their first solo, their mental state about the same. Before they make their first check ride, mental state about the same. Why? Why are they doing this? Why are they functioning the way they do? Why are they doing this? These factors, they cause people to act in very, very predictable ways. So almost every single client that I get in, I absolutely positively know pretty much how they're going to act, because it's very, very predictable, especially when you're narrowed down to one trade like aviation that I'm in. Also, it's also an attempt to satisfy certain needs. And we're going to talk a little bit more about these needs in a minute, but we're trying to attempt to satisfy a certain need. It could be a need for recognition, it could be a need for power, it could be a need for love, or whatever you have. But you're having certain needs and you're trying to get those needs fulfilled. But along the way, if we're trying to fill these needs, if there's at any particular time any form of like a fear coming into the nature, you can end up having this thing called fight or flight, and this is a pretty big deal. A lot of people who initially enter the flight training portion of their lives, the biggest portion of the biggest age range of people outside of an ab initio or start to finish kind of career-oriented thing is around 35 years old. So they're already in life. They're using this disposable income. They're financing their toys, like a big boy's toys or big girl's toys, and so they're trying to do these things with the residual income, and but there's always that fear of failure. And how could that help? How could that hinder a person? Well, if a person has a fear of failure, they may not even attempt to even get into it. Or let's say if a person's taking a CFI course, and they think that it's just too hard. This is too hard. I'm never going to get this stuff. Well, that's that fear kicking in, and it can happen. So what is my job as a CFI? My job is to motivate my clients, and make sure they don't have that fear associated with this. And normally these human needs and everything that we have is always going to be centered around what seems to motivate someone. Why would a person be motivated to come out and learn to fly? Now, I used to ask my instructors when I was in the flight school, I go, what are you selling? When a person comes into this flight school, what are you selling to that person? And I would get all kind of things like, well, we're selling flight training hours, we're selling ground school, we're selling... I'm like, no, man, you're missing the big picture. You know what you're selling? Passion. Love. You're selling a feeling. Nobody just goes and does aviation like, I've done, let's see, what else to do? Oh yeah, I'll go ahead and do that, or yeah, I've got to find that it's a pathway to this. No, they want to get in an airplane because airplane's like the best thing ever. Like flying is so incredibly BA, that it's incredibly like, man, I love being in an airplane. That you're selling passion. You have to know that as a flight instructor, because if you don't, you're just simply not going to be successful in this trade. So when we are looking at these needs, to satisfy certain needs, well, what are these needs? Well, these needs that we have are several different things. And these are the things that humans need that are required for normal growth and development. And these are satisfied in somewhat of an order. And we had a couple of people in psychology actually take on this a couple of times and try to go in and try to figure it out, and a couple of reinvented the wheel kind of things. But Abraham Maslow is probably is the very first one who really came up with something kind of concrete that we understand. This only works with first world countries. It doesn't work with third world countries. But first world countries normally have these needs derived in a specific order. And normally this is like it's like a pyramid, and at the base of the pyramid you have different levels of the pyramid. So you got to build your baseline first. And what's the baseline? The baseline is called physiological needs. And physiological needs are those things such as like any biological needs that the person must have going to the restroom. Is it too hot? Is it too cold? But just keeping up with the physiological needs of the student. So that's the very first thing. Some of you have probably been in an airplane before. I know I've been in an airplane where I had to go use the bathroom and I couldn't think about anything else but going to the bathroom. So that need not being met is not good. So I need to make sure, have I eaten? Am I thirsty? Am I hungry? Am I tired? These physiological needs, very, very important. And then we have one called safety. Well, what do we mean by safety? Well, just like we talked about, there's that fear of like getting into a program that you may not be successful in. What if it's a fear of a maneuver? A lot of you flight instructors have not gone through spin training yet. Some of you have probably done some aerobatic or done some spin training. And think about that. How many people are absolutely 100% terrified of spin training? That may actually inhibit the training process because of that fear. So we got to have that safety. Maybe a client walks out to an airplane they've never flown before, and there's duct tape on the plane. They don't know what's holding. They don't know what this duct tape's holding. They don't know what this stuff is. That has a sense of safety. Think of all the things that actually could affect the safety. A montage of things, a cornucopia, if you will, a plethora of items could be at cause here. As instructor, it's up to me to make sure that I don't have my client have to deal with that at all. So that's very important for me. Social. On the social side, the student must feel like they are belong and accepted. Normally, this is really not a big problem within the piloting community because pilots like to hang out together. Pilots like for other people to know they're pilots. Like the old joke, how do you know there's a pilot at your party? They'll tell you. So, very social people, and they like to know that. But what about your students? In what regards to that? Well, when they first start, you have to kind of take them around the school, introduce some people. Hey, this is John. He's my new student. Welcome to the school, John. Yeah, make them feel good. Make them have that social interaction feel. A lot of flight schools out there make everybody dress the same. That way you can see somebody out there. Hey, I recognize you with their blue polo shirt. Nah, that's not the guy from my school. That's the Best Buy guy. Yeah, that's who that is. I thought he was from my school, but he's not. Anyway, we like to dress everybody the same so they have that type of social interaction. The next thing is called ego. Now, ego can be, or egoistic can be two different ways. It can be called esteem. So we have internal and external. Now, internal esteem is how the person thinks about themselves. External esteem would be how a person thinks that others are thinking about them. So how would I as an instructor battle internal self-esteem? Well, it's pretty simple. Like, for instance, I may have a person who's going through CFI training. They come to me and they go, hey, I did not realize what I was getting myself into. Man, this stuff is complicated. And I'm like, no, it's not really that complicated. Are you sure? Yeah, man, I think I just need to drop the course. My job as an instructor is to massage that internal ego and say, you can do this. You can be successful. You can do this. I can help you. Trust me. I'm here for you. That's your job as an instructor, to massage that internal ego. But what about if it's an external ego or external self-esteem? How do you deal with that? Well, how is someone portrayed by other people at the school? What if you're debriefing them in the middle of a group of other students and it's not a good flight, and you're telling them all kind of stuff like, oh man, your landings, they were absolutely terrible, and your takeoffs were terrible, your slow flight, your maneuvers, basically the whole entire flight was just terrible. That's not good. I can't do that as an instructor. I have to massage that external ego, that external self-esteem from my client, because I can't allow them to think that others are thinking badly against them. So they have a need for that. Some of that stuff is pretty easy. I just have to talk to my client. They solo. I make a social media post. I tag them in it. When they solo, I cut their shirt off. I hang it on the wall. That's pretty simple. Pretty simple things to do. You just got to do research and find out what it is. The next one actually doesn't appear in this pyramid that we have in our book called Maslow's Hierarchy of Human Needs. It doesn't actually appear in there, but it was added after the pyramid was made. It's called the cognitive and aesthetic need. It's actually pretty simple. It's probably, in my mind, probably the most important, because I don't think you can satisfy the rest of this stuff if you don't have this one. Cognitive was what's going on in the mind. When we talk about cognitive need, we're talking about the students need to know. What are they trying to get? Well, they're trying to know how to do something. They want to know how to do something. Like what? Like take off, land? Yeah, all that above. Yeah, every bit of that the student wants to know. So they have this demand, this need they're trying to satisfy. They have a need. Where do they normally get it from? Who has two thumbs and knows how to fly airplanes? This guy. So they're going to come to me to figure out how they need to do this. Yeah, there you go. So here's the deal. The aesthetic part of that is the bond the student has with me. If the bond is not good, they're not going to be able to... What do I mean the bond is not good? If the bond is not a positive bond, if it's not like, if the student doesn't respect me and I don't respect the student, there's not going to be that aesthetic bond there. So that in order to satisfy that cognitive need, I have to satisfy that aesthetic bond. So to have the cognitive and aesthetic satisfied is the student has a need to know information. I have a need to supply that information, to work as an instructor, to be a good pilot. So therefore, I have to satisfy the cognitive and aesthetic need. The last one is self-fulfillment. And or sometimes it's called self-actualization. And self-actualization is a student's ability or the need to realize their own potential. Like, where could they go? Where could they be? What is this ultimately leading to? One of the best things I like to ask my clients when I'm training them is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? That's your goal. That's where they want to be. They're trying to realize their own potential. They see themselves, they're walking down the concourse there in the Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport. They got their little blue outfit on it. How you doing? Dodge Shellnut, Captain. Delta Airlines. Good to see you. Have a good flight. You got that. You're thinking about that. And every bit of the thing that you're doing right now is based off you at some point probably being able to do that. Like that may be your need. Like I have a need for speed and to be in that blue outfit with the blue hat. Captain, Flagship Airlines coming at you. You as the instructor, I as the instructor, have a responsibility with my client to help them fulfill that need. So I have to be aware of these needs. One of the biggest things that could come in the way, the ability to stay motivated by the student. I can't just concentrate just on the needs. I actually have to know what seems to motivate someone. If I'm not concentrating on what seems to motivate somebody, they're absolutely positively not going to do what they need to do. And sometimes at certain points within the flight training regime, like filling out a nav log. Oh, Who enjoys filling out nav logs? There's a couple of weirdos out there that like to fill out nav logs and stuff. That's fine. I'm gonna admit, I'm one of those. I like doing nav logs. I like to show people how easy it is. Why? Why do I like to show people how easy it is? Because I've seen people get incredibly demotivated by the fact that they actually had to create a nav log. I could see a change in behavior definitely in someone when I say, hey, would you sit down here and do this nav log? Now? Like, yeah, now. Man, you shouldn't be that way. Come down and let me help you to figure out why that is. So I've got to be able to center on that motivation. I know that motivation is going to be the reason why that person acts in that particular way. And I've got to know that as an instructor. If I don't know that, I'm not going to be able to help them meet those needs and to stay properly motivated. And that whatever that motivation is, it's always going to lie at the heart of whatever that individual's goals are. Always. And what is that goal? Well, the goal is basically an object of that person's efforts. So what the efforts that they make go into the goal, and the goal goes to motivate them, or goes to get that final motivation, what they're striving after. Okay? But along the way, man, students will have a reason for everything. They'll have excuses galore. They'll have reasons. They'll have so many different attitudes that you're going to have to deal with, and these things called defense mechanisms. So what are defense mechanisms? Well, those are going to be the things that the student is going to use against you, the instructor, against me, the instructor, that I'm going to have to deal with. Okay? And so, like what? Well, we have an acronym. It's called Dr. FCPR. And the first D is denial. Now, denial, everybody has probably suffered from denial at some point in their life. It is the absolute most common, 100% common defense mechanism. A person simply 100% cannot see the belief in the reality of things. Did you hear so-and-so passed away? What? Are you serious? No. Oh my God, please say this is not true. They're in denial about it. I'm sorry, but you didn't meet standards today on the day's practical test, and so I'm going to have to issue a notice of disapproval. A what? It's a notice of disapproval. It means you didn't pass. I didn't pass? Are you serious? Why? Denial. Very simple. But if I see that from my client, I have to kind of step in there and just kind of battle against denial. And go, well, let's talk about why. I don't want you to be in denial about things. I want you to understand. And we can do this. If we learn how to properly assess, if we learn how to properly teach, we can battle these. We're pretty simple. The next is repression. Repression is like an ultimate denial. Matter of fact, it's so incredibly ultimate that the human psyche, the brain says, you are not going to remember this. Here we go. Let's put that in the subconscious. And people who suffer from repression end up having like some pretty heinous things happen to them, or some things that's really affected them on a psychological level. This may be, people who were a victim of some type of an abuse in their life, maybe as a child or at some other point, in which the brain just says, these memories, these items that you're having to deal with, they're too dangerous for your mind to deal with. So we're going to just kind of put that in the back part of your mind, and we're not going to be able to deal with that. Normally, a flight instructor cannot even make a dent with repression. I don't even know why they put it in the book. This is something that's definitely 100% dedicated to a professional. If I think that a student is suffering from repression, I have an obligation to help that client, to say, look, I think you probably need some professional help. And of all these guys to list in, this is probably the most dangerous one, repression. And I don't think it's something that an instructor could handle. Not unless the instructor is a psychologist or psychiatrist, I guess. The next D is displacement. Think about displacing something. I want to displace something from here, and I want to put it over here. So I'm going to displace something. In this particular instance, the displacing is our feelings. So an example of this would be, I'm going to go both ways on this analogy. So the one is, something happened prior to coming to the flight school. I got mad at my wife. I go to work, or my student comes to the flight school, and instead of the happy-go-lucky person they are, they're incredibly pissed off at their wife, who they have to live with, and they can't show any of that type of anger towards them. So what do? They get to the office, or they get to the school, and they take it out on the first victim there. They're displacing their anger. You could displace in any type of emotion that ends up being a really hurtful emotion or a bad emotion. And that is displacing. And so where do you normally see displacement? You may actually have a bad eval. I may give my client a bad eval because I don't know how to talk to my client, and then they go home and they take it out on their person they live with. Not good. So we as instructors, I must ensure that I guard against any form of displacement. The next one's rationalization. I love rationalization, especially when I see a person suffering from it. It's almost comical. But rationalization is a defense mechanism in which the person, they 100% truly believe in their excuse, their reason as to why they don't have something accomplished, the reason they didn't do something, the reason why something is what it is. And man, do they got the excuses. And they truly 100% holistically believe in it. Hey, why don't you have this assignment? You mean the one you gave me yesterday? Yeah, the one I gave you yesterday morning when you came. And I told you to have for this lesson today. Do you have that assignment? Man, I ain't got time to work on that. You know what I had to do yesterday? I don't know. You undoubtedly spent a lot of time rationalizing because you got all kind of excuses as the reason why you ain't got your assignment. Do you have it or do you not have it? I don't have it. Okay, well, stop rationalizing about it. Just man up. Get over there and sit at the table and do your assignment like I asked you to do. Probably don't want to talk to them like that. But you get the gist. They're going to rationalize. They're going to have these bona fide reasons as to why they think that the reason why they haven't accomplished something is correct. You can't allow that. You can't allow that as an instructor. The next one we have is fantasy. Fantasy is something that is, it's basically, if you just want to say daydreaming, perfectly acceptable. See a student in the classroom and they're just glassy-eyed. Probably daydreaming about something. Another form of fantasy is when a student is, let's say a student is really big at the flight simulator. They have a nice flight sim at their house. Or even at school, it doesn't matter. And you tell them that they're pretty bad on their landings. And they're like, I don't know what this guy's problem is, man. You know how good I can land a 787? It's not a Cessna. That's not a Piper. That's not a Beech. That's a Boeing. And the Boeing Stearman's the smallest one that I know. But yeah, you can't do that. Stop living in the fantasy land. Come back down to reality. Come on back. Come back to me. Come back to the light. Stop living in this fantasy world. Compensation. Another defense mechanism. Compensation. I like to call this the red Corvette theory or big four-wheel drive theory. You're compensating for something. I don't know. What are you compensating for? How would it happen in aviation? I go, well, Linda, you know, your landings today were probably not the best landings I've ever seen you accomplish. And Linda says, well, Todd, my approaches were dang near perfect. I go, well, I understand, but I'm not talking about your approaches. I'm talking about the fact we had to taxi to maintenance after every single landing. That's what I'm talking about, Linda. So don't let them compensate for things. It is what it is. Tell them, keep them in line. Projection, little bit like displacement, but not really. You're displacing your feelings. This other one, you're projecting a blame. You're projecting a blame, a causal type effect. So where would you see this? Probably absolute best one, failing of a check ride. Receiving a notice of disapproval on a check ride. Who's the very first person that they blame every single time? The examiner. If they're not blaming the examiner, who are they blaming? They're blaming the instructor. Blaming the instructor, poor instructor, because he didn't do his job or her job. Boom, he gets drug into this projection blame. Then they're talking. Oh, really, what happened on the check ride today, John? Man, this dude didn't prepare me for nothing, man. I went in there. It was terrible. That examiner ate me for lunch. No, it's just because you didn't study. You didn't do what you're supposed to. Stop projecting blame onto other people. Okay? Sometimes it just happens like that. Sometimes we just don't know what we're supposed to know. But it could also be that you're the instructor and you're projecting blame back on the student because you failed to do your job, or I failed to do my job as an instructor. And now the student fails, and then I start projecting immediately back to him. You shouldn't have said that. You know, I taught you better. And the student's thinking like, I don't remember ever talking about this. Anyway. Reaction formation. Because of the wording of this, reaction formation, probably one of the most complicated ones to actually deal with. But it deals with a person actually saying the exact opposite of what they feel. They're doing the exact opposite of what they feel. So here's a couple of examples. Grade school playground. Little boy, little girl out there, and the little boy is being very roughhousing with the little girl. And he's pulling on her hair, he's pushing her around, pinching her. What does that mean? Does that mean he doesn't like her? No, it means he likes her. And he does all that stuff because he's fond of her. So that's a reaction formation. It could also be something where you've been planning an outing with a friend for a while. And it comes time for the outing. It's Friday night. You're supposed to meet at 8. The person calls you at 7 o'clock and says, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. I had this thing come up and I've got to do this other thing. And then you on the other side start doing your reaction formation. And what does it sound like? It sounds like something like this. Yeah, don't worry about it. Oh my God, please don't worry about this. Yeah, oh my God, I've got so much stuff to do. Laundry piled up. Oh my God, I've got so much stuff to do. I've got work to catch up on. This was like a blessing that you canceled. No, it's called reaction formation. You don't want to say the true things because it's just too hurtful for you. Where do we see this a lot in aviation? The written test. You go take a knowledge test for a practical exam, and man, you have hit that test prep course. Oh my God, you have tore that thing up. You have done deep study for like 4.5 hours one night, and you go to take your test the next day, and you score like a 71, and you think to yourself, wow, 71? Man, I at least thought I was going to score like an 85 or something. 71? And then what's the reaction formation to this? 70's passing. That's not truly what you feel. If you would have made 100, man, you would have been tacking that. You would have been like making photocopies, posting them around the school, leaving them in underneath, folding them in half, leaving them underneath people's windshields. Y'all see that 100 I made on that test? Just saying. Yep. So that is your defense mechanisms that you have to go through. A lot of helpful videos on the internet in regards to this. Is kind of a side note outside this lecture. A lot of great videos on defense mechanism. So if you don't like any of my analogies, you can definitely use someone else's. No problem on that. And with these defense mechanisms, I'm going to have to also deal with stress and anxiety. And man, these can be really, really big. So stress is always going to be there. And it's just a normality that you're going to have to deal with, a norm that you have to deal with. But anxiety, man, that can be rough. And we have a lot of times where the anxiety is hitting very, very hard. First solo cross country, the check ride, the practical test. Holy cow, that is a very, very big one. So anxiety is the feeling of nervousness, worry, or unease about something that is going to happen. Hadn't happened yet. Going to happen, and you have anxiety about it. Where do we see these anxieties in our life? Something that's going to happen. We don't know what it is. We probably don't even know when it's going to be. So for us, it's absolutely the check ride. For other people, it could be like you're meeting a new person or something and you have a little bit of anxieties going on. You're doing something for the very first time that you're actually a little bit scared of. You have a little bit of anxiety. A lot of things can actually make a person very anxiety. So how do I deal with that? Well, if I have a person going to a check ride, okay, that's like the biggest anxiety I have as an instructor. So the person's going into the check ride. What do I do? How do I handle that? Well, actually, it's not that complicated. Most instructors, how do they handle anxiety when a person goes to the check ride? They tell them this absolute buffoonic crap. They say things when the person goes into the check ride like, okay, just relax. Okay, just relax, calm down, and everything's going to be okay. Yeah. Do you think any student ever in the history of aviation has ever been sitting in the check ride room, waiting on the DPE to get there, waiting on the examiner to get there, and the instructor came in and said, hey, just relax, calm down, and the student went, huh, why didn't I think of that? Relax, calm down. Yeah, I was over here pretty stressed with a lot of anxiety, and I never, not 1 second did I ever think about relax. It's crazy. You have to treat anxiety as a normality. Because it is. For somebody going to a check ride, it's pretty normal they have anxiety. So what do you do? What do you tell your student? What am I going to tell my student when I walk in that check ride? I'm going to say, look, here's the deal. You've done a lot of studying. You've done really great over the past couple of months. You have put most effort that I've seen anybody else do for this. Get in there. Do the absolute best you can. That's all I can ask of you. If you do the very best you can, that's all I can ask of you. And I send them into the check ride. And they probably go in there feeling a little bit better than just saying, hey, don't screw up my pass rate. I may not be able to get my gold seal if you screw this up for me. No. No. You cannot do that. And this anxiety stuff is the main failure for a check ride. Why? Because from a psychological standpoint, if a person suffers from anxiety, they will have hesitancies to act on things, and they'll also have an impulse to do something, even if it's wrong. If they have high anxiety levels, they'll do that. That's why my biggest advice when people go into a check ride is like, just say the first thing that comes to your mind, man. Say the first thing that comes to your mind and just say it. Okay? If you're really unsure, don't say anything at all. Use your references, use your resources, look it up. Don't give the examiner any answers until you know what you're going to say. But if you have something that immediately pops into your mind, just say that. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be correct. Stress. Like anxiety? Not really. Stress is good. In normal or in very low quantities, or even in like everyday stress is needed for health. It's healthy. Normal stress is healthy. high levels of stress for long periods of time, not healthy. You can end up having some pretty bad instances happen with that. So as instructors, we have to know how to handle anxiety, but we also know how to handle stress. Well, stress is good. Why is stress good? Well, because if a person is in a stressful situation, a lot of times they will handle that situation very rapid and with an exact response. Typically, if a person's stressed out about something and they're in a very stressful situation, they would normally handle it that way. But it's only going to be within the limits of their training. If we have done our job as an instructor, they will handle that stress wonderfully. The more aeronautical decision making, the more choices that we give them in their training, the more whys in the road we give them as options to do. Okay, this approach doesn't look good. What can we do? Well, we can see if we can go around. We can, how many options do we have? If the person only feels like they only have one or two options, their stress level is probably going to be a lot higher. But if aeronautical decision making, ADM, and situational awareness is going to be able to help with this. But what would be some abnormal reactions to stress? Well, we have an acronym here. It's called PRE-SIM. And the P stands for painstaking self-control. If you see someone suffering from painstaking self-control, that is an abnormal reaction to stress, and you need to shut that down really, really fast. Say, for instance, if you're the very first time in IMC conditions with someone, and man, they're like G.I. Joe Kung Fu gripping the yoke, and they're just looking down, and they're just a lot of painstaking self-control to do what they need. That is way too much stress. You need to call for controls, have that person take a sip of water, kind of relax a little bit. That's way too much stress. You're going to pop in a cork, that's just bad. They don't need to be underneath that much amount of stress. Rapid changes in emotions. Do you know anyone that has a very stressful job and shows a lot of rapid changes in emotions? I do. They're called pilots. And a lot of them are called student pilots. A lot of things going on. They're learning a lot of new stuff, and they don't understand a lot of these things because instructors sometimes may not be that good, and they don't know how to handle that. So they're just emotional roller coaster. And you're like, man, we need to kind of take a break from this or something because that's way too much stress level. Your emotions are just going crazy. What about extreme over-cooperation? You ever been in a really high stressful level and start over-cooperating crazy with somebody? Sure you have. If you're on an eval flight, stage check ride, man, people can be really extreme over-cooperating in a situation like that. Telltale sign. Man, what you so stressed out about for? You shouldn't be that cooperative. You shouldn't be yes sir sandwiching me everything I say. I mean, let's dial it down a notch or two. Let's see if we can get your stress level down a little bit. Severe anger directed towards the instructor, service personnel, or others. I've seen sometimes at schools in which these big flight schools have a lot of planes, and a student gets there in the morning, does the weight and balance, the performance, does everything, checks the maintenance, everything for the airplane. They go into the check ride, they do the oral, the student goes out to this airplane that they've already pre-flighted in the morning, and their operations department has switched this airplane to another airplane. And this, I'm going to tell you, this student gets incredibly stressed out to every single person. They start showing anger towards maintenance. They start showing it to the crew that took it, to flight ops for doing it, for making this thing work like this. They're angry with the instructor for not telling them. They're angry with everybody. It's just too stressful. They can't handle that. That's why you shouldn't allow that to happen for your student. inappropriate laughter or singing. You know, the first time you see this, it's quite comical, but it's not funny to the person it's happening to. Everybody that comes through CFI school, the one thing I see that a lot of people just absolutely hate is the very first time they get in front of a group of people and have to present something. And I told this student that was in class one time, I said, so you're going to be the very first one. And the student was like, so I've got to win? And I'm like, man, what in the world is that? Well, there's stress level. That is man, I just brought a bunch of stress onto that student like that. And that was their way of dealing with that stress. So, when I used to fly in IMC conditions by myself, when I first started doing piloting, I would hum and whistle and sing. Because when you can't see outside that airplane and you're by yourself and there's nobody in there, man, that's a rough thing. That's rough. That's a high stress. And I would just sing out loud any song I possibly knew the words to, or hum out loud to deal with that stress. Mark changes the mood on different lessons. You can see this happen every time I give John a navlog. He goes off the deep end. Why? Well, because maybe he doesn't know how to do a navlog. I've got to find out why he's so stressed about these marked changes in moods on different lessons. Like every time I go to this lesson, one lesson, John's just off the chart, man, when it comes to this stuff. But how can I, as a pilot and instructor, how can I battle these things? How can I help my client to not have to deal with these things? I cannot get into battling defense mechanisms. I cannot get into battling anxiety and stress unless I can actually talk to my student and communicate with them. So in communication, we have three basic elements of communication. We have what we call a source. That's like me, if I'm talking to my student. The symbols. That could be like the words, the expressions, the gestures I'm using to kind of give my stuff to the student. And then we also have the receiver. And that's when it's on the receiving end, the listener, the reader, etc. You know, the thing about a good flight instructor, all three of those together. You have to learn not only how to speak, but you also have to learn how to be that receiver and listen to your student when they're talking. Because if you don't, the students, you're not going to have a good relation with that student. As we're going to talk about that here in just a second. So those are just the basic elements of communication. Source, symbol, and receiver, SSR. But you know, when we are trying to communicate, and normally in aviation, in flight training, communication is the absolute 100% way that we do work with our clients. So I'm trying to convey a message to my student, either verbally or some other way, but I'm trying to convey a message. But things can actually come in the way of that. So they can actually bounce off. Like my way of trying to communicate, there's a barrier. And the acronym here is COIL, C-O-I-L, COIL. And so the first one is called confusion between the symbol and the symbolized object. So that this is a barrier to me effectively communicating with my client. And that is confusion between the symbol and the symbolized object. So you're trying to talk about something, you're trying to say something, and the student's just not getting it. And it could be because they don't have a lot of time in the plane, or they don't have a lot of time, knowledge area in aviation or something, but they don't understand it. And believe it or not, I've actually had such a confusion between the symbol and symbolized object that I've actually had this happen where I was sitting in the right-hand seat and I said, hey, keep your hand on the yoke while taxiing. And the student went, what? Are you saying there's an egg over here? And I'm like, what egg? What are we talking about? I'm like, no, I'm talking about yoke. Y-O-K-E. You know, the thing that looks like an inverted thing of one of those things they put over a beast of burden in a field, pull a plow with. Oh, you didn't know that because there was a confusion between the symbol and the symbolized object. It's, put your hand on the steering wheel. Oh, the steering wheel. Yes, I got that. That makes perfect sense now. Yeah. So don't let it be some type of confusion between the symbol and the symbolized object. That's just a way of teaching that you need to be aware of. The O that we have here is overuse of abstractions. I see this a lot with instructors. Using the word like always, or give a little, or hold up a little. A student pilot has no idea what that means. Imagine having a brand new student pilot and coming in to land, and they're a little bit low, and you say, hey, why don't you hold the nose up a little? Be prepared for a whip stall on short final. What if I told the student to give it a little power? They're going to firewall the power because that's an overuse of abstractions. They don't know what I'm asking for. So I have to be aware of that as an instructor as well. Interference. I'm coming into a controlled towered field. During the flight, my student's $1,300 noise-canceling, everything, boom, bada, bing headset, batteries go dead. I'm not sure if you know what type of headsets these turn into when the battery goes dead, but it is not a good headset when those batteries go dead. So we're coming into the terminal area with my student. Terminal area, batteries in the headset are dead, ATC's talking, pilots are talking, maybe the gear warning horn is going off or something like that because I'm doing some type of gear failure with the student. And then on top of that, I'm teaching. So they can't hear me. The ATC talking, other aircraft talking, warning horns going off. Holy cow at the interference. What a barrier to me effectively communicating with my student. Sometimes you just have to make a U-turn and go right back out and then put all the stuff into perspective and then come back in when the workload's not as high. I mean, you got to think about this stuff as an instructor. One of the other things that may have is called a lack of common experience. This is a very technical subject area. Very technical subject. And if you speak over your student's head, then that's a problem. Sometimes you may speak over your own head. I had an adult learner in the back of the class one time, and I was talking about the pitot and static system. And I got onto the altimeter, and I said, blah, 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 aneroid wafer, blah, 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 blah. Hand goes up in the back of the classroom. Adult learner, always asking questions. Adult learner, you have a question, adult learner? What's your question? He says, yeah, what's aneroid? What does aneroid mean? And I'm like, aneroid. I think that's those things you get from sitting on the toilet too long reading emails on your phone. No, it's not that. It's not that. I don't know what it is. Wow. So there was a lack of common experience even by me in that situation. But there was definitely a lack of common experience with him because he didn't know what it was. So what do I have to do? When I have big words like that, I actually have to come to my student and go, so you got this thing inside of it's called an aneroid wafer. And what this really means, aneroid wafer is literally the same thing as saying dry barometer. I don't know why they didn't say that. It's aneroid wafer, because aneroid is just a fancy word for dry. So I have to explain that as a student, because it's very technical and I can't talk over my student's head. Lastly, to finish up here, there's one more thing we have to talk about, and that is, how do I actually develop my communication skills? Like, how can I get better at communicating? Well, you know what's always helped me communicate a little better in life? Little liquor. L-I-Q-I-R. Little liquor always helps me communicate a little bit better. So let's look at liquor. Now let's see what liquor means. Well, we have an L. That means listening. What is listening? Listening is hearing with comprehension. And that's very, very important. You have to be an effective listener. If you're not an effective listener, you're not going to be a good instructor. Now, my wife has told me all the time, she says, let me tell you, Todd, there's two things I don't like about you. One, you don't listen to me. And the second thing she said was, I don't know what it was. Anyway, so I wasn't listening to her. So what's the next thing? Well, the next thing is instructional communication. So over a period of time, I'm going to have more and more and more and more experience. And when I do this more experience, I'll be able to illustrate my point much, much better. But that experience is the only thing that's going to make that happen. So in order for me to have that instructional communication, I've got to be able to have that experience. And that's really going to make me a powerful instructor as time goes by. The next thing is questioning. How do I know you understood the words that are coming out of my mouth? I'd simply just question you. So, do you understand? Okay. Well then, I'm just going to question you and see if, just some type of focused, open-ended questions. I'm just asking questions here. Well, you seem to understand. So I think my communication went well. What about instructional enhancement? Well, instructional enhancement means that a good instructor is always learning. It's not necessarily experience. It just means learning. Like to actually go and do the research of something and actually get better with it. That's instructional enhancement. You're getting better because you're getting smarter. Then the last one we have is role playing. And role playing in terms of communicational enhancement or developing communication skills, means that with my student, we're going to play different roles. Okay, so John, you're on the downwind, and ATC comes across the radio. They're at the control tower field, and they say, 135 Alpha, give me a right 360 for spacing, report when reestablished on the downwind. What would you say to ATC, John? So I would play the role of ATC, and John would play his own role, and we could role play back and forth. Or I could even ask my client, what would it sound like if somebody asked you to give S turns on final, what would it sound like? And then what would you say back to them? How do you give a wind shear report? Tell them your student and see if they can give you a wind shear report back. But that role play is key. So today we have talked about a large amount of things that an instructor can do to better work with their client in regards to knowing what their needs are, knowing what their motivation is, and being able to sense and work with their client and build those communication skills that can help them be a wonderful instructor. And if an instructor can do this, they will definitely grow as an instructor and be a better instructor and will be able to serve the needs of their student. Let me check my lesson plan and make sure that I talked about everything. Do you have any questions? And that's the end of it. So that's task A from start to finish. And if you have your PTS out, or you had your PTS out, you'd see I hit every single point, everyone on the way down. A little long. Why? Well, because I'm throwing stuff out there. I have stories. I have a lot of things I want to throw out there with you. I'm hoping that after you listen to this, you get a better idea where you need to be on the 40s. I'm not saying talk for 55 minutes, 56 minutes. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you could shorten this conversation down to a good 15 or 20 minutes without putting as much emphasis on each item. But I don't think it can be done in 6 minutes. And it probably really can't be done in 10 minutes. So don't worry about a time. Don't worry about time with this. Just do the best you can to understand what the FOIs are asking you to do as an instructor. What are they asking me to do as an instructor? Keep asking yourself that. What are the FOIs asking me to do as an instructor? There you go, because it's going to help you to be a better instructor. I want to thank you very much for joining me this evening for this FOI, or whenever you're listening to it. Thank you so much for being a wonderful patron of mine. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you're getting as much as you can possibly get out of these videos. I really enjoy doing these videos, and I really enjoy working with you along the way. Feel free to post anything in the blog down below, and I can get to those questions as soon as practical. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks.